Well, Australia's prisons are notoriously private. Inmates are forbidden from talking to the media without permission, and guards are silenced by airtight contracts. But a new News Corp podcast series, On Guard, aims to uncover what really goes on behind bars. I spoke with News Corp national crime writer Amelia Saw about the project earlier today. Amelia interviewed 20 corrections workers in research for this series, so I started by asking her what surprised her to learn about the experience of those working in Australia's toughest prisons. You interviewed 20 corrections workers in research for the new podcast On Guard. What did you expect to find going into these interviews, and what surprised you in learning about their experiences working in Australia's toughest prisons?
Well, look, I guess my reason for doing the interviews is because we never get to hear from prison officers. Many of them are bound by kind of airtight contracts. They're not allowed to talk. And so going into this project, I wanted to hear what really goes on in the front lines of our prisons. What surprised me was, I suppose, just what these guys have to experience on a daily basis. So each day that they show up for work, they might experience an assault, they might see inmate violence, drug overdoses, they might come up close and personal with famous criminals that we've all heard about, like Martin Bryant, Daniel Morcombe's killer, Anita Cobby's killers. These are not ordinary experiences.
Absolutely not. Was there a standout interview or story that you heard?
Look, it's hard to pick one, but I think one of the standout interviews I had was with a woman called Beatrix Trixie Bennett Hillier. Now, she's a grandmother. She's like any ordinary woman that you will kind of meet down at your local shop. Yet she spent every day working in prisons such as Goulburn Supermax, maximum security, and Long Bay. That meant she was dealing with men like Janine Balding's killer. You may remember that was a terrible gang rape in the late 80s. Anita Cobby's killers. So she was getting really close and personal with these guys. She talks about one incident where John Travers, who was the ringleader of Anita Cobby's gang rape and murder, he actually had his eyes, he kind of set his sights on a young, pretty female officer when she was going around doing her routine unlock of the cells in the morning. He pulled her into his cell. Now, we've all heard about what he did to Anita Cobby. You can only imagine how terrifying that must have been for that officer. Trixie said that the young woman, probably not surprisingly, left the job soon after. But these are the kind of things that they just put up with on a daily basis, and they're forbidden from talking about. Trixie also talks of another incident in which Janine Balding's killer actually had it out for her. He had a bit of a grudge against her because she kept refusing his kind of requests, and he actually kind of lunged at her while she was walking through one of the prison yards, and she was very lucky that another inmate actually stepped in and prevented what could have been a pretty horrific incident.
I can't even imagine how terrifying that would be. How do these correction workers cope with what they deal with?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, because a lot of them aren't coping. What kept coming up in interview after interview was experiences of PTSD. If they didn't have a personal experience of PTSD, they knew someone in the workforce who was really struggling at the moment. The problem is that they find it difficult to speak up. They're concerned that if they say something, they might not get a promotion, they might get stood down. There's a real culture of kind of stiff upper lip. You've got to be tough enough to do this job. If you're not, then you shouldn't be working in it. And what happens is this underbelly of post-traumatic stress disorder is kind of bubbling away all underneath that industry. And it's only now that they're starting to kind of gain a bit of momentum to speak up about what they're actually going through.
So what more needs to be done to support them? They clearly haven't been getting the support that they need. Many of them suffer from PTSD. What do you think needs to be done so they can get better support?
Well, what a lot of them have said to me is, first of all, they just want awareness. They want people to know what they're doing on a daily basis. They want recognition, as the kind of unseen, unheard frontline workers. At the moment, they do have access to employee assistance counselling programs. However, a lot of the feedback has been that these people aren't particularly trained in the types of experiences prison officers may have. So they're looking for kind of specialised support. But really, it's just, encouraging people to speak up about their experiences and actually be brave enough to come forward so they're not kind of suffering alone.
Absolutely. And how important do you think it is that these stories are told and for Australians to understand what our correctional officers face every day?
Oh, look, it's incredibly important, and that's why I did the podcast series. My mind was blown listening to their stories. And, when you think about it, unlike police, firefighters, these are all people who are heroes in their own right, who every day they go to work, they know that they might risk a life-threatening situation. They know they might come across something, really traumatic and harrowing. These guys go to work every work day knowing they're going to come across it. They know when they get to work they're going to meet a murderer or a sex offender or a pedophile. They know exactly what they're getting into. And, they witness something like a suicide or they're attacked themselves, and the next day they get up, they put on that uniform again and they head to work.
Amelia, well done on revealing our everyday heroes. I'm really looking forward to the new podcast series On Guard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And News Corp's On Guard podcast, sharing stories from Australia's toughest prisons, is out tomorrow, November 23. Visit the website onguardseries.com.au.